So good evening to all and welcome for the second of our set of presentations on how to train for the Tour du Mont Blanc. There are about 15 weeks left as I speak, so that's plenty of time to make a serious impact on your training or on your level of fitness, so long as you can train seriously during that time. So let's see how to do that during the next 40 minutes or so. Okay, this is just a reminder of the series of presentations. I made the first one on part one of the training plan on the 12th of December. It's now available on YouTube in the Alpine Cols channel if you want to review it. There's some stuff in there that I won't come back on today. Today, of course, it's part two, and then on the 3rd of July, I'll present hints, tips, strategy, and tactics and everything you can do to get your best possible result on the day itself. Before getting into the meat of it, I just want to take a minute to talk about our pre-race coaching camps. All of these are designed to help you get your best result at your target events. The photo there is from our recent coaching camp on Gran Canaria in the Canary Islands. The next one we're running is in Corsica in 3 weeks' time at the end of April for 7 days of endurance riding in the mountains. Should be good weather in Corsica, so that'll be a great one. And then the one after is in June in Savoie in the Alps, and it's focused on the Étape du Tour. Most of the riders will be riding the Étape du Tour, but it will be equally good as a big training block for the Tour du Mont Blanc with the added bonus of coaching on your technique. For details, please go to our website or send me an email, info@alpinecols.com. All right, coming now to the event. Let me begin with a reminder that this is seriously tough. It covers 330 kilometers and includes 8,300 meters of vertical ascent, spread out over 5 major climbs and a bunch of shorter ones, adding up to a total of about 154 kilometers of climbing. So it's huge, and you've got to take this seriously. The start's at 5 a.m. and the cutoff time to finish is midnight. So all finishers take somewhere between 12 and 15 hours. 19 hours, I should say. There are usually around 40% who don't finish. The event is above all an endurance challenge, so there's no official classification. So what does it take? In part one, I presented the event demands, these general principles and the structure of our training plan at some length. So I'm just showing it to you here as a reminder. The first general principle is you need to make the Tour du Mont Blanc your priority, certainly in your training and to an extent in your life for the next 3 months or so. Be consistent. It's no use training hard one week and doing nothing the next week. Building a strong aerobic base is the absolute priority in training terms. Very linked to this is developing your fat burning capacity. If you're someone who right now needs carbohydrate to ride in zone 2, you'll never be able to eat enough to fuel your ride. So hopefully you'll have developed your fat burning capacity over the previous years, or at least the last 3 months or so. Next is durability. This is the ability to repeat steep climbs one after the other, and especially when your legs are really tired towards the end. You should obviously do as much climbing as possible in your training. I know that's a challenge for people who don't live near mountains. You can simulate it to some extent on a decent, smart trainer, but there's no getting away from doing as much climbing as possible if you want to do well at the Tour du Mont Blanc. It's important to increase the load progressively so that your body can absorb it and adapt in a healthy fashion. Remember, you only get stronger during recovery because training breaks you down, and it's during recovery that your body rebuilds and gets stronger. So recovery is just as important as the hard training. Only train when your body is ready for it. That's high load I'm referring to there. You can do a 1 or 2 hour recovery ride pretty much at any time, even if you're feeling very tired. But don't go out on a long ride when your body's not ready for it. I'll come back on that a bit later. And take advantage of your rides to work on your technical skills, particularly climbing efficiently and economically and descending fast and safely. but also eating and drinking on the bike, obviously, taking off, changing your clothing, that sort of stuff. Those are all really useful skills for an event like this. All right, here's a quick reminder of the training plan framework, which I covered in part one. The periodization is based on 3 phases. Preparation is now essentially finished, the base phase. So we're now going to talk about the pre-competition phase, where you add more volume and more specificity to get yourself ready for the actual event. Here you can see our framework training plan, which you may have downloaded already from the Tour du Mont Blanc website under practical infos normally, or training plan. Or just send me an email to request at info@alpinecols.com. This is the second page, which provides you with a typical training week and suggested workouts during each period. So there's lots of information in there, and there's an accompanying 8 or 9 page document which explains the whole philosophy of the training in detail. So it's well worth going through if you want to learn more about why you should do particular types of training. So now let's look at what should be in the training from now to the end of June. The key objectives or focus during this period are, first of all, to strengthen your aerobic endurance so that you can ride up to 10 hours or more without undue fatigue. And at the same time, in parallel, you're optimizing your fat burning capacity, and partly you do that through riding at a long, slow pace, and partly you do it through optimizing your nutrition. So that when you optimize your nutrition, you fuel your training, you facilitate fat oxidation, and finally you train your gut for the large amount of carbs you need to eat during the Tour du Mont Blanc. So those are 3 different objectives. We'll look at them in detail in a minute or two. So that should represent 90% of your training, those 2 parts. The third part is to work on your durability, which is your ability to repeat the long climbs at the same pace without losing power. Particularly the last climbs, if you have no durability, you really struggle to get up the last couple of climbs. So that's another 10% of your training is focused on that. Then, 4th point, the Tour du Mont Blanc is as much a mental challenge as a physical one, so it's important to develop your mental strength. And finally, include some exercises to sharpen technical skills, such as descending and cornering at speed and so on. So those are the objectives and the focus. Now let's look at how to do it. First of all, aerobic endurance. You need to do, at one level, it's really quite simple. You just need to do as many long rides as possible below LT1, the first lactate threshold, or the aerobic threshold, the first threshold out of the 2 thresholds. Okay. Now, the key metric here is time, not distance. If your goal is distance, you'll be tempted to ride fast to finish early, which is contrary to what you're trying to achieve. The point of the long rides is to develop your aerobic endurance and your fat burning capacity together, and this is optimum at a level of intensity below LT1. So set a target of time to ride, not distance, and make sure you stay below that first threshold. And for most people, that means it's a fairly wide range I'm going to give you, but it's usually between 60 and 70% of your critical power or your FTP, or indeed your maximum heart rate. Okay, but you should know your own zone. So stay in zone 2. Do not go into zone 3 on these long rides. So how long should they be? Well, you should progress to at least a 1 10-hour ride by mid-June. So you may be doing 6 or 7-hour rides at the moment. I hope so. We should be close to it, and build that progressively. So by June, you're able to do a 10-hour ride per week. You should, in the same week, so in a high volume week, you can then do a second long ride, which right now might be 2 to 3 hours, and you want to push that up to 4, 5, or 6 hours by June as well. Then you can do 2 more rides in the week, a recovery ride of 1 to 2 hours and another short recovery ride. A low volume week would be 50% of this or less. I'll go into more detail as to what the week could look like towards the end of this presentation. That's already to give you an idea about how to split those long rides up. Now let's come to nutrition. So this is a very important part of your training, what you eat and when you eat it. I went into this in a lot of detail in my 2024 video series, which you can find on YouTube. So here I'm just going to recap the main points. The first point is to make sure you're eating enough to fuel your training. The second is to use your nutrition to help develop your fat burning ability. And the third is to train your gut to absorb enough carbohydrate during the event. Okay, so first, fuel your training. The main points are that it's important to eat a wide variety of the highest quality non-processed foods possible. Try to avoid industrial food and to adjust the amount you eat to your energy expenditure. So you need to eat much less on a rest or recovery day than on a day with a long ride. So it's not something we generally do, obviously, but when you're training for something like this, you need to modify quite significantly the amount you eat from day to day, depending on your training load. On a long ride, you might easily expend 3,000 or 4,000 kilocalories, which you need to replace. Now looking at fat burning. To maintain your ability to burn fat, which hopefully you've developed over the last 3 months, make sure you start any low intensity ride at genuinely low intensity. If you start even at moderate tempo intensity, even without riding, even without doing anything near a sprint, you're going to kickstart your body into burning carbs rather than fat. Your metabolism has the two options. Basically, when the intensity is very low, it's going to burn more fat and very little. It varies from one person to another, but more fat in any case. Perhaps, in the best case, even zero carbs. But as the intensity goes up, you will start burning carbs, that's for sure. So when the goal is to adapt your body to burn more fat, start your training at low pace. Particularly if you start the ride without breakfast, so in a fasted state, stay on the safe side and don't go above 50% of your critical power or FTP for the first couple of hours. Now, on rides of up to 5 or 6 hours, it can be fasted, and you can also take no food for the first 2 hours, maybe 3 hours once you're used to it, even if you're fasted then, but make sure you have enough with you to eat from then on. Really important after 3 hours to start consuming at least 60 grams of carbs per hour, and then and over time ramp up to 90 grams as your gut gets used to eating this much. Importantly, make sure you eat an adequate amount of carbohydrates soon after the ride to compensate any deficits. Okay. So these are general guidelines, so adapt them according to your own feelings and experience, but always have some emergency food with you in case you bonk. Now, it's a completely different approach on your very long rides or any rides with intervals. You need to be properly fueled for these anyway, so that's where you can take the opportunity to train your gut to tolerate the high amounts of carbs you're going to need at the event. So make sure you have a good breakfast, ideally 3 hours before, and then start fueling from the start. Okay, if you're like most people, you probably rarely take more than 60 grams of carbs per hour, which is the equivalent of 2 bananas or 2 gels or 2 energy bars or any combination of that per hour. There's a clear advantage, nevertheless, in being able to use up to at least 90 grams, because this will help you conserve the glycogen in your muscles that you need for the final climbs. So experiment with different foods and gels to see which works for you. What does your gut tolerate the best? And don't forget, you can also drink your carbs, of course, because a bottle of energy drink can include up to 30 grams or so, depending on the concentration. So we talked about aerobic endurance and nutrition. The third point is to work on your durability, which is your capacity to get up the steep climbs on tired legs. So the better your durability, the more likely you are to be able to finish. There are 3 ways to work on this for the Tour du Mont Blanc. The first is to do high zone 3 or low zone 4 interval sessions at low cadence, high torque. So low cadence depends on what you're used to. It's typically below 60 RPM and maybe as low as 40 to 45. But be aware, it's important to have good technique and a strong core. Otherwise, you're likely to hurt yourself. Okay, so be careful about that. And don't, above all, don't, if you're not used to doing low cadence intervals, don't suddenly start doing them at 40 RPM and for a long time. You're practically guaranteed to hurt your back if you do that. So don't do more than 5 minutes or so at a time until you're really comfortable with it. Remember to be progressive. The second way to work on durability is simply to increase the intensity near the end of a long ride, when obviously your legs are already tired. So don't necessarily do this every time, otherwise you'll soon find yourself overtraining. But from time to time, if you can build in a climb at the end of your ride, or if you live in a flat area, what you can do is go out for a 5-6 hour ride, come home and immediately get on your home trainer on a simulated climb. If you've got a smart trainer that will and get on that and do a long climb for an hour and a half, that is a great way to develop durability. Low cadence, high torque. And third, of course, you can participate in a ground fondo or a sportive in the mountains. And in this case, choose the long distance and don't try to smash it. You're not there to get a good time. You're there to develop your durability, your aerobic endurance and your durability. So keep to a steady endurance pace. We're lucky in France to have a wide choice of events. This is a list of French events until the middle of May. Of course, there's many more in May and many more in June. You can find them on velo-cyclosport.com. I think there are other places you can find them too. The two I've highlighted there in Alpine Cols pink have the highest amount of climbing. La Route Verte in the Vosges, so not too far from those of you in Belgium, for example, has nearly 3,000 meters of climbing. La Thierry Claveille-Rolla is south of Grenoble in the Isère department, so that's quite a bit further away. That's a decent event. It's got almost 4,000 meters of climbing. So worth considering doing one or more of those if you have the opportunity. Now, before doing a hard session, whether it be an event, whether it be intervals or a particularly long ride, it's important to realize you should only do it if your body is ready for it. If you do a hard session when your body is not ready for it, meaning that you might be unusually tired, you've got stiff legs, you've got sore muscles, or if you're feeling unusually stressed, whether that stress be related to training or related to something that's going on in your life or at work, if you're feeling all of that, it's literally a waste of time to train hard because your body will not be able to create the adaptations you want. The reason for that is basically your body is full of catabolic hormones dealing with the stress and the sore muscles and so on, and therefore you won't be able to rebuild after having trained. So it's literally a waste of time. So how can you tell if you're in this condition? Well, professionals and some serious amateurs have tools like heart rate variability that I've talked about before for measuring your state of fatigue and stress. But the thing is, these are not easy to use, unfortunately. They're subject to error. And frankly, I'd classify them as marginal gains. So really all you have to do is note how you feel on the 3 scales I'm showing you there shortly after you get up in the morning. So a scale of fatigue, a scale of muscle soreness, and a scale of stress. So score yourself honestly, especially before an intense interval session or a 6 to 7 hour or longer ride. And the warning signs would be readings of 5 or more. When in doubt, I would recommend you to be careful. You can still train easy, but avoid hard sessions because they add a lot of extra stress. And again, they simply are not going to be beneficial. Coming now to mental strength. There's no way you will finish the Tour du Mont Blanc if you're not mentally strong. I really think it's the major reason why people don't finish. Apart from unless they show up completely untrained. But if you show up trained, The main reason why you won't finish is mental. We don't have time to go into this in detail this evening, but the key question is this one. Why are you doing this? If you feel exhausted, let's say halfway, three-quarters of the way around, if you've had enough and you can't think of a good reason to push on to the finish, why would you bother? On the other hand, if you have a meaningful reason to do it, only things that are genuinely out of your control will stop you from finishing. By moments, you'll feel tired, uncomfortable, in pain, fed up, but this won't stop you if you've got a strong enough reason to get to the end. However, for this to work, the reasons must be meaningful. You must have thought about them in advance, and they must be yours, of course. So they might be internal, personal ones, such as your own enjoyment, your own satisfaction of collecting the finisher's medal, your desire to prove something to yourself, perhaps. Or they might be external, such as raising money for a charity or to please or impress others. And there's nothing wrong with that. Both internal and external motivations are totally valid, and they're not mutually exclusive. You can have several different motivations pushing you to do this. Although psychologists tend to agree that internal motivation is usually more powerful, but it doesn't matter that much. The key point is that you should think this through and be clear about it in advance, so that when things get tough, you can remind yourself why you're doing it and why you're going to get to the finish. So there's a lot more to mental strength than this, of course. You can find the Alpine Cols guide to it on the Tour du Mont Blanc website, or if you can't find it for some reason, just send me an email to request it directly, and I'll be happy to send it to you. Point 5, you should be practicing and improving your technical skills, such as climbing, of course, seated on various gradients, standing 20% of the time in endurance mode when you drop the cadence. Climbing is all about efficiency and economy. So it's a genuine skill and it needs to be learned. Descending, of course, concentration is essential, particularly towards the end. You'll be descending potentially very fast. There's an enormous amount of corners to get around. As you get more and more tired, your concentration will suffer. It gets more and more dangerous. So it's really important to have a high level of skill and to stay concentrated. Eating every 15 minutes, you need to think about this. You need to practice. The food needs to be easy to access. If you've got energy bars, you should pre-open them. There's a whole load of stuff to think about so that you can eat easily every 15 minutes. Changing clothing while you're riding. For example, taking off a jacket or putting back on, you can save a lot of time doing that, and you won't lose the riders you're riding with, which you probably will if you have to stop to take your jacket off or to put it back on. Of course, if you join one of our coaching camps, we'll work closely with you to help you improve these skills. Otherwise, work on them yourself or get a clubmate to help you. But don't neglect technical skills. They're really, really important. Still under technical skills, don't forget that it sometimes rains in the Alps, obviously, and it can be very cold at 2,000 meters and above. So riding in the rain brings several additional challenges compared to racing in dry weather. So make sure you practice it. The first point is nothing worse than being out in the rain with poor clothing. So this is important to test until you find the best solutions for you. The second point, of course, is bike handling, which is obviously harder on wet and slippery roads, and that needs practice. So therefore, don't be a fair weather cyclist and get out and ride sometimes in the rain so that you're used to it. I know people that live in Belgium, I don't have to say that to Belgians, but to people that come from the south of France, for example, I definitely have to remind them to do this. Now, a few words about off the bike work. Climbing over 8,300 meters on the Tour du Mont Blanc requires not just aerobic fitness and durability, but strong leg muscles. And the best way to strengthen your muscles is off the bike. You should plan on 1 or 2 sessions per week. Hopefully you've been doing them up till now through the winter season, where the goal was really to build leg strength. From now on, the goal in this phase is more to maintain the strength of your leg and core muscles than to increase the strength. Remember, you must use proper technique and be cautious in what you're doing to limit the risk of injury. It's too stupid to injure yourself in the gym. The second point is mobility and flexibility, which are really important to work on when you're doing so much cycling, and especially as you get older, from about 40 years old onwards. I suggest 2 or 3 10 to 20-minute sessions per week using techniques like Pilates or yoga. And learning correct technique, once again, is very important to limit the risk of hurting yourself, the risk of injury. Finally, you should complement regularly with other easy physical activities such as walking or swimming. And once again, this is to avoid building up serious imbalances and soft tissue problems over time. Okay, so let's finish with what could be a typical training week. Here's a plan for a 20-hour training week, which would be nice to build up to if you can. If you can't, well, reduce the times accordingly. And notice that most of that time is at the weekend, with no more than 1 to 2 hours maximum each day during the week. So we got 13 hours at the weekend over the 2 days. To do that, you'll obviously need an understanding partner and family if you're going to disappear and train that much almost every weekend. The first thing to note is that you can only sustain this level of training. 20 hours a week is a lot of training if you're already used to it. If you're currently training 10 hours per week, for example, which is already a decent amount, it would probably take from now until July for you to be able to sustain 20 hours per week. So you can, of course, do this or more in a single week. In a single week of training camp in the Alps, you can do 25 or even 30 hours, and that's fine. But you can't sustain it week in, week out without slowly adapting your body to that level of training over a long period. Okay, so, but if you can train this much, then looking at the detail here, the most important rides are, of course, the long, low-intensity rides on Saturday and Sunday, followed by the interval session on the Wednesday, and the 2 very low-intensity rides on Tuesday and Thursday. So we've got 5 rides per week. Complete these with an off-the-bike strength session, probably on Tuesday, and a couple of mobility sessions and a walk or a swim, which could be on Monday and Friday, for example. So that's for the high load week. The recovery week, basically to keep it simple, you basically cut out anything that's intensity. You can still maintain a strength session in the gym if it's a fairly short one, and you cut all the volume by about half. So you bring it down from 20 hours to 10 hours. So that's my suggestions for when you're going to train that much. Again, if you can only train 10 hours or 15 hours a week, then obviously you have to adjust the numbers down. Now, a plan is, of course, no use if you don't follow it. So to help you train properly and consistently, here are some simple research-based tips that have been proven to work. The first point is to write out your weekly plan by hand. So every week, maybe on Sunday evening, you sit down and write out the plan for the following week by hand. There's something about writing it by hand which makes it more memorable, and you're more likely to do it. As you do that, use active verbs. So use something like ride 6 hours instead of a ride for 6 hours, or a ride. Make the whatever you're writing down measurable. So put the time in there, for example. And if you use visual reminders like Post-its, then renew them every day. And the reason for that is because otherwise they become part of the scenery and you simply don't see them any longer. Okay, so if you use Post-its, then you just need to rewrite it every day, which again is a good thing to do. You're more likely to do your plan if you do that. So here's an example. Written out by hand. This one says complete 15 hours of training this week, including ride for 7 hours at low intensity, and so on and so forth. So it's very clear. It's very actionable. The verbs are active. Everything's measurable, and you're much more likely to do it if you do that. So there you have it. If you follow these tips, I am pretty confident you'll be ready for the Tour du Mont Blanc on July the 12th. Let me remind you that I'll be giving a final talk in this series on July the 3rd, entitled Your Best Result on the Day. And so that will, of course, be devoted to the event itself and how to ride it for the best. So plenty of hints and tips for the actual ride. Too late to train by then, of course. On July the 3rd, you'll be beginning to taper and get ready for the event itself. So that's it for this evening. Now it's up to you. Take this advice, adapt your training plan, and above all, follow it. If you'd like some professional support, so you're really on top form on the day itself, let me remind you that we can help you in two complementary ways. The first is a training course for a big block of training plus individual coaching on your technical skills. And of course, lots of advice. So we've got Corsica and Savoie in June. And the other possibility is you can contact us for one-on-one coaching where we'll work with you week by week to help you adapt your training to how it's going. So if you've got any questions on that, you can always send me an email and I'll be happy to reply. So thank you for your attention. Enjoy your training and your race. Good luck, and hope to see you there.